Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome again to lovely Istanbul. I'm just going to test out how this thing works. There we go, fine. So my name is Sven. I'm the CEO of AICP, the International Convention Association of Convention Centers. And first of all, I would like to thank the organization for having me today as a speaker to get a review in lovely Istanbul and allowing me to share a little bit our thinking about the future of organized events, but then from the point of view of convention centers. Because for those who do not know AICP, we are indeed the International Association of Convention Centers. We have 180 members in 60 countries worldwide. And so how do we think the future of organized events looks like? Well, it's going to look like this, right? We are extremely positive about the future of organized events, right? So what you see at the left side, that was the situation in March last year. What you see at the far right side, that is the situation we're evolving to, but for the moment, we're a little bit in the middle, right? We are growing, definitely, and that's not based on the feeling, but that's based on facts. Let's take a number of cases. North America, United States of America, there what we see is that the vaccination program is going full steam. The president has promised that the majority of the citizens will have received their vaccine by May, and as a result, the number of contracted organized events throughout the states in America is exploding. So it will happen in the United States, but it's going to be national events only to start off with. Then we move to Europe. As you know, we're a little bit slower on vaccination, to say the least, and we're going through several waves. Nevertheless, on the national level, on country level, we have events coming up, small events, 100, 150 people, but we expect as from July that we will have regional events be made possible, which will pick up, and that is contracted as well, as from September. But once again, it's going to be either national or regional events, not yet the really big international events. And then moving to Dubai, that's the happy exception. They have loads of international events happening already for months. They're doing extremely well. And then moving further to the east, China, Japan, and Australia, all having national events opening up again. China is doing business for months and months now. And so that's all going a great way. So indeed, we are growing. It's going into the good direction. But how does the future look like? That's the question of the session. And perhaps it's best to take a step back and to remember how we felt in March last year. This is how we felt, right? It's really, oh my God, what is happening to our industry? Everything is falling apart. And it was not only our industry, it was the entire society, it was the entire economy coming to a standstill. But if you then look at how we reacted, I must say our sector did it in a very brave way. And I think the first steps were these. I think everybody had a look at impact. What is the impact? What are the revenues lost? What can we do? Then, as maniacs, we started to reschedule. We pushed back by 3 months, by 6 months, by 8 months. And then we did something different. 25% of our members, by the way, were transformed into a healthcare facility. They were transferred into hospitals. Now, those same members are being transformed into vaccination centers, which is a far more positive story, of course. And the other thing we did is we tried to do advocacy, and I must say that was not successful. We reached out to local authorities, we reached out to regional authorities, trying to convince them that our industry is important, that it needs to be given support and priority. And we didn't really succeed in doing that. Which begs us for the question at that time, what's next? What are we going to do? And there you saw the strength of our society and our industry. The agility and the creativity we applied was immense. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. The top picture is the convention center in Dublin, which is now happily transformed into the national parliament, because the parliament was simply too small, and they are now sitting in the convention center because there they can work in a COVID-safe environment. The blue picture you see at the bottom is actually Melbourne. They were a bit more creative, even more creative. They transformed themselves into a film studio, annex drive-in cinema. Right. Now that might seem strange, but actually it's not that strange, because if you look at the film studio, what do they need? Staging, AV, technology, catering. typically the things that convention centers are pretty good at. And then we had convention centers which went all out the way. There is one, and there's no picture for obvious reasons. It's the Bella Center in Copenhagen. They transformed themselves into a courthouse with judges and criminals and police. And that came with a whole set of new regulations. But it's not only convention centers who have been creative. I had a long chat with Frank Gervais, CEO of Europe of Accor. The hotel industry, they come up with fabulous solutions as well to deal with the new needs of society. Just imagine that you're sitting in a 40 square meter apartment in Paris, you, your partner, and 2 kids. Then you're actually very happy that Accor Group lends you out rooms on the day rate, so that at least 1 or 2 weeks a day, you or your partner can work in quiet silence and get some work done. Now, let's be clear, that creativity is great, and it's impressive, and I think we did some magic, but it's not what we want to do as an industry. Our industry is about bringing people together around a common purpose, and physical events will be back. There's no doubt about it. To whoever you talk, be it associations, corporates, whatever, they need physical events to drive trade, to drive innovation, and to drive collaboration. And I'm going to illustrate this by this example. This is a Solvay meeting taking place in 1926. Right? As you can see, gender equality at that time was not a high priority. But of those 27 participants, 19 were or have become Nobel Prize winners. They came together for a week, discussed quantum mechanics, and the output of that particular meeting is still impacting science as we do it today. Is there anyone in the room who thinks we can pull this off with a Zoom meeting? Don't think so. We need to bring people together to make this type of thing happen. So there is no doubt that physical events will come back. At the same time, over the last 12 months, we have discovered digital, right? Now, digital was not new to us. We were already testing with digital, both on an organizer's level and on a convention center level. I think it's the speed, which was slightly different, right? We've entered the new digital age at warp speed. Solutions which we thought we were in place in 5 years' time were actually put in place in 6 months. And the speed came with successes, it came with failures, and it came with a lot of questions, right? Now, how does that future look like? How do we integrate digital into our next normal? And the honest answer is that today we don't know. That is the only honest answer. If you take, for example, the notion of hybrid, right? Hybrid has been the buzzword for the last year. Everybody needs to do hybrid. And I thought they were referring to my car, but no, it's actually a meeting. But then you ask a organizer, for you, what does hybrid mean? And the organizer will tell you, for me, hybrid means twice the cost, half of the revenue. That's what hybrid means. And if you talk to a convention center, and you ask them, what does hybrid mean? They will say, well, it means that I have only 100 people on site, I've got 1,000 person in the cloud, and I've got loads of space which is not used. That is hybrid for me, right? And everybody is dealing with that question, because we don't know yet how the future is going to look like. But we can have a little bit of a peek on the direction it's going, right? And I think the key word when we're having the discussion is purpose. What do we use things for, right? And let me give you the example of the European Cardiology Society. It is a massive medical society looking into cardiovascular diseases. And it's really, really important. Now, it's called European, but in fact, they're a global association. Now, you can't stop science. You can't stop healthcare. You need to have a conference. And so last year, for the first time ever, they did a fully digital one. It was great. They actually doubled the number of participants. But more importantly, they were able to attract delegates coming from regions which, for economical or other reasons, otherwise never attended before. So that was interesting. The other thing which was interesting is that you saw little groups of doctors coming together in one place, putting on a big television screen, and they had selected a number of sessions they wanted to attend. and they combine that with a barbecue. Right? It's a very different way of consuming scientific content. Right? However, another learning was that the real innovation, the real coming together and thinking about how to deal with new diseases doesn't happen in the digital world. It simply does not function. You need to come physically together to make that happen. Right? So if you think about the future, for me, there are 3 things to think about when it comes to organized events. First is digital. I already mentioned it. Digital is not going away, but you need to think about what you're going to do with digital. Right? It's not a gimmick, it's an enabler. Right? So if I take, for example, our case, the AIPC annual conference taking place mid-July. Last year we had a hybrid, it was a complete failure. This year, we're going to have a digital and an on-site. Reason being, our strategy until 2019 was to attract all the CEOs for 2.5 days to discuss the future of organized events and convention center. And they networked and they learned because we had a good speaker. Right? But we also realized that in the next 12 months, a lot of change is going to happen in our convention center. So that educational part should not only be for the CEOs, it might also be for the other people in the convention centers. So we're going to have two things. A digital program, educational, focusing on middle management, and we're going to have an on-site experience focusing on CEOs. But the one thing to remember, and I really insist on this, digital and on-site, 2 different worlds. On-site is like this. It's theater, it's a stage, it's an audience, it's a foyer. Digital is a TV show. It's a very different thing. So our digital thing will run from 3 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, 20 hours of content for 2 days. Will anybody watch for 20 hours? Of course not. Because they're used to Netflix. They're going to watch whatever they want to watch, and every stage they're going to watch it, wearing joggings and sneakers and stuff like that. And that is perfectly fine. But we will be able to reach that audience wherever they are in the world. The second thing, which is going to be extremely important going forward, and you're doing a great job on that here in Istanbul, is safe value chains, right? Because if you want to convince people to come to a place, to have a physical event, I don't want only the hotel to be COVID safe and be certified, or the airport, no. I want to be safe the moment I arrive till the moment I leave. Here in Istanbul, with the certification process, 1,300 companies are being certified. That means your value chain is safe. And it's not easy, because I saw the list of criteria, 131 criteria. That's rock solid, being tested every month by a neutral party. That means that Istanbul is a great and safe, secure place to go to. And that type of value proposal is going to be extremely important going forward. And the third one is sustainability. Right. Let's face it, a reality whereby I would jump on a plane, spend 7 hours on a plane for a 1-hour meeting, does not go anymore. But also destinations and venues are becoming more and more sustainable, thinking about the ecological footprint. Right? When I did my first major event 20 years ago, I asked, what is the greening in your place? And they said, they switch off the lights at night. Okay, that's 20 years ago. If you talk to venues now, it's all about waste reduction. It's all about decreasing the energy use. It's finding different ways of doing things. If you look at destinations, it's offering free public transit. It's offering free access to the bike networks. And that's really important for associations as well, because it adds value to what you do. Right? So 3 things: digital, safe value chains, and sustainability, for me, are game changers. Which leads us to an interesting question. Sven, that's all very nice. How are we going to make money out of this? Because that's an important question as well. And there, I think, we need to get out of our trenches a little bit. What you see happening is still venues trying to sell square meters and catering packages. That will need to change somehow. If you think about the hybrid, that enormous space, we can't use it as we used it in the past. We'll need to use it differently. And the digital element is going to be there. So perhaps, and this is just a theoretical example, perhaps instead of selling square meters, we need to sell a price per delegate. And so imagine I'm a venue and you're an organizer. And I tell you, you know what? Per physical attendee, you pay 100. Per digital attendee, you pay 20, with a minimum for each. That means that independently, whether there's somebody in the house or somebody in the cloud, I make money as a venue. But from an organizer's point of view, it means that the risk is extremely limited. Because I perfectly know this is the minimum I need to reach, and all above, I know what the incremental cost is. Is that a model which is being applied for the moment? No. Do I see it happening? Definitely. But some venues and some destinations take it 2 steps further, right? Take the case of Scotland. Scotland has a regional government, 21 policies in place, including anything from job creation to healthcare. And in Scotland, they're facing an interesting challenge. If you look at mortality around cancer, it's extremely high in that region. And so the government wants to address that. They want to beat cancer. And they sat down together with the Convention Bureau and the Convention Congress, and they said, can we do something with organizing an event around this? And so they started a discussion with the European Society for Radiation Oncology, who has as a mission to beat cancer. Same mission. And so they brought everybody together around the table, and they came up with a plan whereby they would bring the yearly Congress of the association to Glasgow, but it would be combined with an awareness process and an entire campaign for the population, and they would put in place metrics which would allow to measure the impact of all of that on the population, and they expected a decrease by 5 to 6%. Now that might not seem a lot, but from an economical point of view and from a healthcare cost point of view, that's enormous. Right? And so that means that your entire economical discussion around an event becomes a very different discussion using very different figures. And that is the type of thinking I think we need to go through. So for me, there is definitely a big blue sky there for organized events. I'm extremely optimistic we're going to go there, but we'll need to do it in a different way. We'll need to think it through. We'll need to change the models. We'll need to change our value proposal. And that is great, because if there's one industry who is not afraid for changing and who has loads of creativity, it's ours. So I'm really convinced we're going to make there. And as you can see, it's like with the climber. The sky is blue, but still a little bit of work to go before we get there. And sometimes it's actually very useful to look outside our industry to get a little bit of inspiration. And my source of inspiration, believe it or not, is Formula One. It's not because I'm a major car fan, not. But this industry, in 40 years, is moving from crisis to crisis every 3 to 4 years. Right? This sport, 40 years ago, had a casualty in every race, and was sponsored by the tobacco industry. So it's not really the place you want to be. If you look at that industry now, it's about technology, it's about innovation, and providing that technology to anything from packaging to space vehicles. That's what they do. And they have diversified their sources of revenue, and they had one casualty in the last 20 years. Now, how did they manage to do that? How did they manage to get out of crisis each time? Well, those teams that are on the track, they're the fiercest competitors. They wake up in the morning and it's going to say, how am I going to beat the other one? That's what they do, really. But when they have a crisis, the teams come together and they look at the crisis and they say, okay, this is what the problem is, how are we going to tackle it? And that is how Formula One is re-emerging each time they have a crisis. And that is exactly what we as an industry need to do, and what we are actually doing today, thanks to Mustafa, who actually brings us together here in Istanbul, right? It's this. It's talking to each other, learning from each other, and making sure that we progress together. Right? And then as an association, we do that as well. So AIPC, together with UFI and together with ICA, representing the exhibition industry and representing the associations industry, we have collaborated far more intensely over the last 12 months. And one of the outputs of that are the best practice guides we have created on reopening organized events, but also a very recent one we published on being the best vaccination center in the world. And in that terms of collaboration and openness, we don't only share this with our members. If you go to our website, you're interested, you go there, you download it, it's yours. Because we believe this is too important to keep for ourselves. This is something we need to share. Because that is the only way, in my view, that we're going to get out of this stronger. And for me, there is no doubt. We, as an industry, we will come out of this crisis stronger, robuster, and better than we've ever been. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. But so, you know, after this presentation, I really do feel more hopeful about this. And